Florida brought in several impact transfers through the portal this offseason, and you guys have been asking which one seems like they'll be hits for the Gators. So we're chatting with Nick De La Torre on the early returns and to see what he is seeing from the Gator newcomers. So Nick, overall, let's talk big picture before we get into specifics of who Napier and his staff have hit on. How do transfers seem to have acclimated to a new city, a new team, a new culture, a new staff, new program?
It's interesting because you used to have to sit out a year, so you wouldn't have that many, and you almost had 3,000 guys in the transfer portal just this last season. So I think, and it's going to open up again in May, so we'll get more in May. I think it's becoming normal, and I think a lot of players are treating college more of like a business. So, hey, maybe I loved, Teradja Mitchell loved Ohio State, played there for 4 years. It wasn't getting the playing time that he wanted as a senior, had one more COVID year. Hey, I need to go somewhere else. And for those guys, not to say that they won't love being a Gator, but they're coming here for a reason. It's to get to the NFL, to get to the next level. So I think you get a lot of business decisions, and guys are attacking, practice just like that. Hey, when you come in as a Cam Carroll from Tulane, I don't have time to figure things out. I need to have it figured out now because I only have 1 year. This is my last spring and my last opportunity.
All right, let's talk about some of the transfers specifically here. First up front, UF lost a ton of talent on the offensive line. Who are the guys or the guy that has impressed you the most on the offensive line this spring?
Micah Mazzccua, and thank you to the Baylor SID for putting the pronunciation guide there because it's the spelling doesn't look like Mazzccua, but that's how you say it. He is, as Rob Sales said, you wouldn't want to be in a dark alley late at night with this guy. Just has a mean streak with him. Was one of the better linemen in the Big 12 at Baylor, and I think he gets a lot of comparisons to Osiris Torrance. But we'll play on the other side of the offensive line. So Osiris is right guard. Micah will play on the left side. But just a really, really intelligent football player, a guy that you tell him to correct something and it's not 1, 2, 3 reps. It's corrected for the next rep. I think really high football IQ, big, strong guy. And I think especially as a run blocker, where I think Florida's offense will kind of lean towards more run heavy this season, I think he's someone who could have the potential to be on those postseason award lists.
All right, let's go to the other side of the line of scrimmage. Any defensive linemen stand out to you?
From the transfer portal, I think Cameron Jackson and somebody who I really like. The talking to Chris Howard, who kicked at Florida and then transferred to Memphis, he spoke glowingly of Cam, a guy who's tall, big, strong, kind of like Micah mean. I would like to see those two go up on a one-on-one to see how that goes out. The biggest thing I've heard from Cam, from coaches and people around Memphis, is he's a guy that has taken plays off in the past, and you have to tell him to go. And a coach will tell you, I'd rather have to tell you whoa than go. With Florida's depth on the defensive line, when you consider Chris McClellan and Princely and Desmond Watson, he's not going to have to play 50 snaps a game. So, hey, give me a solid 35 snaps a game and go all out 35 times. And I think if he's doing that and playing with a high motor, he's going to be a difference maker for that defensive line.
All right. Well, just behind them, linebacker. UF is going to have a really revamped linebacker room. Anybody already looking like they're going to be a hit in that position group from the transfer portal?
Yeah, Teradja Mitchell, really kind of stepping in where Ventrell Miller left off. And I think the world of Ventrell Miller. He had such a crazy career arc at Florida, came in 17 and was part of that whole credit card scandal and missed his freshman year. And just to watch him mature and grow into someone that didn't even need to command respect because it was already given based on the kind of person he was and the way he carried himself. It's a big hole to fill. I think Teradja Mitchell is the guy that does that. Florida did bring in 2 other linebackers in Deuce Spurlock. I wonder how the Ohio State-Michigan pass works out with them. And that's another thing about the transfer portal. You're bitter rivals, and now your locker's right down the hall, a couple down. And then the one that I'm interested in, I don't know that Manny Nunnery, who came from Houston, I don't see him really as a linebacker, which is where he's listed. I think he could be more of a rover, kind of like a safety, a bigger nickel. If you're in a nickel package, you would play him at nickel in running situations, rundowns. But to me, he's the one where I kind of didn't understand the take. It was later on. It was the last day of drop ad. But in that linebacker room, adding 3 guys, I think they needed to after losing over 130 games played between Amari Burney and Ventrell Miller.
Well, the defense will take all the help it can get. Cameron Carroll transferred into an absolutely loaded backfield. Do you think that he could be a hit and a pretty solid third option for UF, or do you think it's too early to tell?
I don't know what they told him because I told Jabbar Lucas that that's a tough sell. You have 1,500 yards and 16 touchdowns coming back in that room. How do you get a guy? And I think what Jabbar Luke sold him. Cam is from Mississippi, but lived the last 4 years in Tulane or in New Orleans at Tulane. And Jabbar Luke says he could have called anybody in that city. It could have been a homeless guy on the street. He says everyone knows me there. And they spoke to my character and kind of like Billy Napier, Cam Carroll wasn't guaranteed anything. You're certainly not being guaranteed to start over Montrell Johnson, who's almost rushed for 2,000 yards in 2 seasons in college. But he's an interesting player. He's really fast, especially at his size, almost at 230 pounds now. I think he's a guy that will make an impact immediately on special teams. And then maybe a change of pace back. Florida's running backs haven't been involved very much in the passing game. I don't know that Cam Carroll was involved heavily in Tulane's, but if you're trying to get in where you fit in, hey, these guys haven't done this. I'd be on the jugs machine after every practice, and hey, I can be your third down running back because you trust my hands. So Cam Carroll's a guy. This is his super duper senior season. I think this is his 6th year in college. So this is it. There's no more COVID years. So for me, if I'm him, I'm trying to figure out any way to get on the field, whether it's special teams or like a third down back situation.
Is there anybody else that UF brought in as a transfer that's really standing out for you?
Graham Mertz, I guess we can't not mention the quarterback. And to me, Florida fans got really excited when Andy Jean mentioned, this is the best quarterback I've ever played with. And my thought was, well, you're 18 years old. You've played 4 years of college. I would hope that the 22-year-old who has graduated college and has started 32 games is the best quarterback you've played with. Florida loves him. I'm not super sold on Graham Mertz, and it's such an important position that you need to have a quarterback. There's not many teams without a quarterback that are going to compete to win their conference or to get into the playoffs. So I'm interested in watching closely that quarterback battle with Jack Miller and Graham Mertz. I think Graham Mertz is ahead right now. But we would be remiss to talk about transfer portal and not mention potentially the starting quarterback that came from it.
Well, and you mentioned that you've got to have a quarterback, and you do. But listen, I don't think UF is stiff in the playoffs next year. But when you think back to those original Alabama teams, when they finally, when they came into dominance really in 2009, 2010, after that, at that point, they had game managers because they had great running backs, they had great wide receivers, and their defense was solid. So I do think there's a scenario that as long as he can be a serviceable game manager, mistake-free, he doesn't actually have to be great or really even particularly good as long as he doesn't hurt the offense.
If he were at Georgia, he could be a game manager. And I think those Alabama teams, it was 4, 5, 6, 7, a decade of top 2, 3 recruiting classes.
Sure.
But that's also the thing where I want to preach patience to fans. And I know it sucks watching Georgia have this kind of success, but Kirby is having this success and Georgia's having this success because they had the number 1 recruiting class in the country 3 years in a row and like 5 out of 6 years. It takes time to get those guys on campus. And I think Florida wasn't in a top 10 class last year after the whole Jaden Rashada thing, but I liked Florida's class a lot, filling in the secondary that needed a bunch of help. You got a bunch of offensive linemen that may not help this year because it's you have to kind of develop at that position, but will be really strong players in the future. So I think it's hard to preach patience, and especially in the fall. But I would say this staff needs time to show you that they can't do it before you point to one bad season and say they can't.
Right. Are there any other positions of need that you think UF might address? You mentioned the portal opens back up in May. Is there anybody that you think that they may go after there? Not necessarily any person, but any position that they may really try and hit the portal hard for?
Yeah, I think you could point to a ton of positions. Quarterback, you only have 3 scholarship quarterbacks. I mean, I go back to that 2013 season, and Skylar Morningweg, who was a walk-on, is playing. You know, you're a broken ankle and a twisted knee away from, having to play a walk-on. So I think Florida will look for another quarterback. And that's not to say that Jack Miller, Graham Mertz aren't good enough. You don't have enough numbers-wise. Yeah. Florida has a bunch of tight ends, but I could see a tight end leaving, and then you might need another one. I think you could look for another safety, an outside receiver, and maybe even another linebacker, another edge rusher specifically, not a middle linebacker, but another edge rusher. So Florida will be buyers when the transfer portal opens from May 1st to 15th. And also the portal's open, but players only have that 2 weeks to put their names into the portal.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. This was fun. Do me a favor. Tell everybody watching where they can read your work here.
Gators Online. That's where we write and where our podcast goes. And you can follow me on Twitter, just @Delatorre, my last name there.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. Let's do it again soon.
Thanks, Allie.
Thanks so much to Nick Delatorre from Gators Online for joining me. Make sure you're subscribed because we've got more great content coming your way later this week. If you missed our recap on how the Gators are looking in spring ball, go ahead and click right here to catch up.